welcome to our Wednesday night study. Tonight's topic is about freedom and equality. And I especially thought this was a good topic in light of the fact that so many people are protesting the different state and government rules virus. And so I thought, what is the some people have heard some of this as we did in the book of Galatians last fall, and then we did part of Genesis. So some of y'all may hear some of the same ideas again, but for many, this is new, and so I want to go ahead and cover some of those things. We're not obviously like we did in the fall over Galatians or in before coronavirus came. Church right now, we are not meeting and complying with the government rules and regulation. And yet at the same time, in the Declaration of Independence, the second paragraph said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal, that they are endowed their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, government are instituted among men. And that is my launching point tonight. I find it interesting that the founders of our country in the Declaration of Independence said we hold these truths self-evident. And in that statement, they say that these truths that are so we don't really need to argue about it. And the first thing that they said is a truth is that all men are created equal. And we have to kind of wonder, where did they get this idea from? And I'm reminded that our founding fathers were indeed Christians. And because they were Christians, they obviously read the Bible and philosophy, and they read other books. And they came up with this idea that all people, some of us may take argument. As a matter of fact, we see through our history that even in America, not all men were equal. We had obviously the civil rights, and Dr. Martin Luther King said that one of the things that he was arguing was this very statement that here the founding fathers in their Declaration of Independence and in the Bill of Rights guaranteed that all men are created equal. But he said it wasn't cashed because obviously African Americans were not equal. Beyond that, we see that about it, equality between men and women, equality in races. When I grew up in Belize, there was this underlying philosophy that the lighter your skin, the more of a person you are, the better you are in the hierarchy of the social ladder. And this is an idea that we need to look at, especially as Christians, is are we equal or aren't we? And part of my belief is we are truly not free if we're not. And that's why I hook these two topics together, freedom and equality. And we need to look at equality first. And as the Declaration of Independence said, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Then, and does that mean, is it only limited to the male gender? All equal, black men, white men, Hispanic men, Native, or does it mean all humanity? are created equal. And by all humanity, I mean, is there any difference between male and female? And it is a question that we as Christians have answered, especially as United Methodists, because 1960s, when gained the right pastors in the United Methodist Church. And it wasn't until 100 years ago that women even gained the right to vote in this country. And I know I'm originally from Belize, and one of the things I liked about America, it was the land of opportunity, the land of and the land of equality. And there are times that we know that people are not treated as equal. And the question that we have to ask ourselves, if did God create us equal? And if so, in what way? And does equality means that we are identical? And obviously, the answer to that first question, we are not identical. God did not create us identical. Each and every person is unique. As a matter of fact, the more we learn about human beings, the more we realize that each individual is so unique that even identical twins have different fingerprint, different eyes, DNA, and the list goes on and on, that there's no such thing as an identity in this world, even though there's almost 8 billion people. So equality does not mean identical, and that we should never treat people as identical or the same, but we should treat people with dignity and respect, and that all people are indeed created equal. So let's look at the first part in creation of man himself. There's two stories in the book of Genesis. The first one is in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, and God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them the birds and etc., etc." And picking up in verse 28, it said, "So God created man in his own image, in the image of God, him, male and female, he created." And reality is we were created at the same time, at least from the Genesis 1 story. And it says God created man. And that word is God created mankind, male and female, he created them. The plural word is at that time, both male and female were created. But then some of y'all would say, but Pastor, what about Genesis 2, where we know the story where God took some dust and formed a man, and his name was Adam. And then later on, he separated that man and created Eve out of the rib of Adam. And I remind y'all that quite often we forget reading a translation, and a translation is not 100% accurate, because one of the things we see is, yes, God did created Adam out of dust, and the word Adam is also the word for earth creature or dust. And that word became the name for the male part. And then we see that when Eve was created, for example, again, we see in Genesis chapter 2, that when Eve was created and God took Eve to Adam, and the man said, flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone, she shall be called woman because she was created out of man. And what Adam was basically saying is he looked at himself and said, I'm made out of flesh and as she is, and so she is my equal. So we see in creation equality. God created men and women as equal, and he created all of them in the image of God. For none of us would say that just because a person is female, they do not have God's spirit indwelling them. And we would not say that they're not made in the image and likeness of God. And so as we read chapter 1, it said, so God said, let us make mankind or humanity in our image, after our likeness. So the image of God indwells all of us, and therefore we are equal. That does not mean identical. It means we are equal, especially at the basic level. I quite often say, in reality, all of us are born equal. We're all born babies. We aren't born who we are today. And as babies, we're all equally helpless. We are totally dependent on our parents to care for us. As a matter of fact, as babies, we can't do anything for ourselves. We can do some eating that when some and that's pretty much it. The body does its work, but at birth we're all equal. We're all born babies. Interestingly, they're equal again. So once we die, it doesn't matter who you are, male or female. Our body is dead, and what we own or don't own, or what we have or don't have, doesn't hurt, because it no longer belongs to us, and we're back to equality. As I like to say, we came into the world with nothing, and we leave this world with nothing. So the question is, where does inequality come in, and where do we have this male dominant society? And for those of y'all who did the Genesis study, we saw that what happened was sin entered into the world, and I'll know the story that the serpent came and talked to Eve, and Eve took from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, gave it to her husband. And I want to highlight who was with her. Adam was there with Eve. It wasn't that Eve tricked Adam, as some people like to say that Eve tricked Adam and therefore he is not as guilty. But we do in the punishment, picking up in Genesis chapter 3 verse 16, where God here is your punishment, and I will greatly increase your pain in childbirth, and you will desire your husband, and he will rule over you. At this point, what we see is women equal. And so the way I like to look at this is, created originally, we were created equal on the same level, but because of sin, both man and women, in fact, all of creation fell. And once we fell, women fell a little lower than men, and men were ruling over them. And or to have dominion over them means that they are under you, and therefore not equal. So the thing that I especially love about the New Testament is that because God so loved the world that he wanted to restore us, and not just us, but all of creation, back to what he created. And so he's his son, and because of his son, restored to equality. And that takes us to the book of Galatians. In Galatians chapter 3, picking up in verse 5:26 there, the scriptures that in Christ there's neither Jew nor Gentile, slave nor free, male or female, for we are all one in Christ. And as we read those verses, and I want to read the verses again, picking up a little bit before. In verse 26, it says, "You are all children of God in Christ Jesus. For all of you who were baptized into Christ have clothed yourself with Christ. Therefore, there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male or female, for you are all one in Christ." And what that is saying is, you're all children of God through faith. So once we become Christians and we have faith in Jesus Christ, we are restored. So from my mind anyway, I put it pictorially, we were created equal, we fell, women fell a little bit lower, but Christ back to equality. And that's what Declaration of Independence is saying. it's saying we hold these truths to be self-evident that all humanity, all men, no matter who they are on this planet, what skin color they are, what gender they are, what socioeconomic differences we may have, we are created equal. Equality means we are all made in the image and likeness of God and therefore worthy of dignity and respect. It doesn't matter what you have or don't have. You are worthy just because you are alive. Then the declaration went on, they are endowed later. So the founding that all of us have been given by God, by these are rights. These are not things you have to earn. Or these are things that we have simply. It says that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the fact that we are endowed with these rights. And because of the society that we currently live in, and I say we still currently live in, because even today I am married and my wife, and I have 2 daughters, and yet it's earning 87% compared to a color you are. Women are earning less than men. And so here we see that even in America, the land of the free, the brave, the land of opportunity, we still do not have equal rights. But thank God we do live in America, because there are other countries that the rights are even less than. There are countries where women are not even given the right education. They're not given the right to be, as a matter of fact, they're seen as less than a person. And that whole idea that people are less than a person, that they're not equal, was propagated in the 1700s when they had slavery, and so a white male compared to a slave, compared to women, and even today in the Jewish religion, men are seen as above women, and women are under. That idea of being ruled by men. We are a patriarchal society, and we see that in Christ. If you have faith in him, it doesn't matter who you are, male, female, Jew, Gentile, slave, or free, that we are all one in Christ. And so equality is one of those things as Christians that we hold. Does that mean that we are perfect and we treat everybody equal? Of course not. As a matter of fact, I made it quite clear that, equality does not mean identical, and all of us have differences, and the differences is seen in everything. As I mentioned, we have unique fingerprint, we have unique everything. And I find it interesting that a God who created us all equal at the same time created us all individually unique and different. And so equality does not mean identical. It means that we all have the image of God and the likeness of God, and we should all be given the same rights like everyone else and treated fairly and equitably. And equitably meaning that we should not treat somebody with special interest or something, or give somebody preferential treatment. And that is one of those things that we are seeing today is, the government sometimes give preferential treatment to one group over another, or and I find it interesting in the Declaration of Independence that governments are instituted among men, and that if a government fails to do those things, that is when the people should rise up, because the government should be working for us, not legislating burdens on us. And so I applaud those people who are protesting because their rights have been impinged upon. But at the same time, during this time, we also need to understand that equality is one of those things that we all have, and those people have that right to protest, but they should do it in a very meaningful way, one of the things that I see is a lot of them are protesting without having masks on and stuff, because just because we are equal doesn't mean we should impinge upon another person's freedom. And that's why I picked the second part of this topic is freedom and equality. And we cannot be free unless we are equal. Because if somebody is unequal to you and they are subservient or less than you, then they're really not free and they're not equal. And so I see freedom and equality going along together. And in the study that we did in Galatians, we see that Paul wrote that we are one in Christ, we are equal. And then later on, that was in Galatians chapter 3, verse 26, 27. But in Galatians chapter 5, verse 1, it says, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery." And so we see the idea of equality and freedom comes from the Bible, that we are indeed created equal. And as a matter of fact, once the body dies, as Jesus pointed out, that we are spirit, and spirit does not have gender like you and I think of male and female, that in Christ there's no difference. And so there is equality there, but more importantly, there's freedom. And these are two gifts that God gave us. And that's what I see the Declaration of Independence is saying, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that our Creator endowed us with freedom and equality. Unfortunately, man and some men take away another person's freedom and equality. We live in a world where we have dictators who dictate what person can and cannot do and cannot say, and they take away and make slave of other men. That's not God. That is we as human beings doing that. And so God gave everybody equality and freedom. And the problem is, with freedom and equality comes responsibility. With freedom and equality comes responsibility. And that is where we really need to look at the reality is quite often, yes, we are free and we can choose to live our lives the way we want. As a matter of fact, I like to say none of us are trees. If we don't like our current situation, we can change it. We can move. We can go somewhere else. Unfortunately, a lot of people would rather complain and gripe and say, well, so-and-so took away my freedom and so-and-so. Hey, I grew up in a third world country and I'm Hispanic. I look in the mirror every day and I still see Hispanic male. And I can tell you, yes, we don't have freedom and equality in everything, but at the same time, rather than blaming, I take responsibility, because here's the truth. I am male. Compared to a woman, being a Hispanic male in the Hispanic world, it was a male-dominant patriarchal society. And so I was higher pecking ladder, so to speak, than female. And I realized that as a Christian, we are created equal and we are given freedom, and we need to live out our Christian lives seeing people for who they truly are, made in the image and likeness of God and worthy of dignity and respect. And that it is my responsibility in two ways. First, to enjoy my freedom and to realize that whatever choice I make in life, I cannot blame the government or God or my parents or my ethnicity or anything else. There are times that somebody in their freedom may impinge on my freedom and equality, but that's on them. And so the second part is to make sure that I do not impinge on somebody's freedom and equality, especially in this male dominant society, that we should not think that we're better than anybody. As a matter of fact, the reality is, growing up, I used to think that there were people that were better than me, and then I'd look around and think that there were people that were less than me. And what I realized is God made us equal. and that there's really nobody better than me or nobody less than me. We're all one. To be human means to be made in the image and likeness of God and to have God's spirit, a fallen spirit that is in us. But it also means because it is from God, we are equal. And God gave us the great gift of freedom. Adam and Eve were not robots, they were given a choice. And we too have that freedom of choice even today. Adam and Eve chose to eat from the tree of knowledge and good of evil. And far too often, we choose also to sin. And so, as I think about those people who are protesting, they are choosing. Unfortunately, some of them I may or may not agree with, and you may or may not agree with them, but it is their choice. And here's the thing, once you make a choice, it's also your responsibility to live with the consequences of your choice. And as Christians, we should afford them the dignity and respect that, okay, you made a choice, but live with the consequence. And so as I see some of these people protesting, some of them not wearing face masks, my thing is, if they get sick with the coronavirus, they cannot blame the government. They're the ones who are not taking precaution. With freedom also becomes responsibility. I'm a big Spider-Man fan, and Spider-Man said, that with great power comes responsibility. Well, here's the thing. We do have great power. We have the freedom of choice. But once we choose, we also have to live with the responsibility and the consequences of our choice. I think quite often we are like in Animal Farm. We all know George Orwell's book, Animal Farm, or hopefully we should. I remember reading it as a teenager in high school, and it was one of those literature assignments. And the animals revolted against man, and one of their rule was all animals are equal. But the pigs were in charge, so to speak, and they raised up the dog and they to be like the police force. And towards the end of the book, the pig and the man had met and they were laughing and talking, and the rule was changed, and it was all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Unfortunately, that is our philosophy sometimes. We tend to say we're all equal, but some of us are more equal because we have more this or that, or because of skin color or whatever. The reality is we should treat people with dignity and respect regardless. I like a story concerning Abraham Lincoln. It goes that when Abraham Lincoln was out in town walking along, he would always tip his hat to young people, little kids. And he was asked, why do you do that? And Lincoln pointed out that we don't know what that person is going to grow up and be. They may be a poor boy today, but one day they can grow up and become the president of the United States, or a doctor or a lawyer or somebody. The reality is they grow up to be what they choose to be. We're all created equal and we're all given freedom. And the question is, what do we do with our equality and our freedom? Do we misuse it and make some others slave? Or do we think of ourselves as inferior and look up to others? I believe as a Christian that we should realize that we're all equal and we're all free. The Bible guarantees that. In Christ, there's neither male, female, Jew, Gentile, slave, free. And it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Yes, we're not perfect. We still live in a fallen, imperfect world. But we should strive, and I do use the word, we should strive to treat people as our equals and allow them the freedom that we have. At this point, I'm going to pause, for I see we're almost out of time for the 30-minute time limit here, and ask if there's any comments or anybody have any questions concerning what we're talking about. I see a couple people on the line, so y'all say hi all and watching. You type a question in that text part. So anybody. I am so glad that I'm a Christian and that Christ have restored all of humanity back to equality and back to freedom. It is now our responsibility to live Christ-like lives. Thank you for your time, and I will see y'all Sunday. This is Good Shepherd Sunday, and so I will be doing the 23rd song, and so I hope to see y'all on Sunday. The good news is we got the video cameras and equipment for the live streaming from the conference. They came in, and so hopefully this Sunday the live stream quality